So working with the team this afternoon. So Dan Friday's the guy at the bench there with the white glove on. Taylor's the guy with the glasses. George Kinnard's there standing. George, would you wave your hand? And George is part of our team here. My name's Jeff. This is Eric Snee. He's going to start emceeing here in just a moment. And also, Dan has a friend here, another glass artist, Penny Rakove. And she's backstage right now doing some social media posts for Dan. We're going to be live streaming here in just a moment. And we also will be taking questions from our viewers online. But here's Eric Snee to take away the MC.
Thanks a lot, Jeff. Let's have a big round of applause for our team up here today. Get everything warmed up. And like Jeff said, my name's Eric. I'll be narrating the first bit of the show here. So if you have questions, let me know. And we'll be taking questions from our online viewers as well. So welcome to the folks at home. Welcome to you folks here at the museum. And again, Dan Friday working for the week here at the museum. And this morning we made a glass bear. Now you can see an example of a piece that Dan made. Was this yesterday or Monday that he made this bear? Yeah, Monday he made this bear right here. And, oh, thanks. The glass takes a long time to cool, and it's cooled based on its thickness. So that was made Monday and put into an oven, and it cooled for about 2 days. So just this morning we took it downstairs and kind of flattened it off a little bit. So you're welcome to come up and check this piece out. For this afternoon session, for the live stream, oh, there's a great camera angle right there. For the this afternoon, we're going to be making a large-scale sculpture, a totem. So the base of the totem is going to be a large rock or boulder. That's going to be the base for a large bear who's going to be holding a fish, and there's going to be some tree components at the top. So there's going to be quite a lot of assembly that goes into this piece as we get moving. All right, so we've got Amanda here. Amanda's our social media manager. Do we have any questions for online yet? Not yet. Okay, so we're just warming up. What's the glass we're using? We're using Spectrum Nuggets 2.0. So it's really nice glass. What Dan's doing right now, he's going into what we call a stuff cup. So we've got a small pickup oven. And inside the oven, he's got some of these cups arranged inside. And so this is a way to get the color on the very outside of these sculptural forms. So basically, he's going to fill this cup with solid glass and then sculpt it. So these have been preheated in that pickup box. And it looks like George is just ramping the temperature up a little bit. They can stay there indefinitely. They're holding at about 910 degrees. But before the hot glass goes into them, we'll bump it up to maybe 1100 so it doesn't get thermally shocked and broken. So that's what's going on right now. So looks like Taylor's got the glass heated up, and Dan has it to the right size and volume. And in just a moment, they're going to pick up that color cup inside the pickup box. Some beautiful colors here. So all this prep work happens before the final assembly. So just to make one of these cups, you're maybe looking at maybe an hour of work just to get the cup finished. And again, you're welcome to come up, check out some of the different parts and components. We've got this second bear that is also out of the oven from Monday. And this one's been cut level, so you can kind of check it out. Any questions at this point? Okay. Again, my name's Eric. Let me know if you have any questions. Our visiting artist is Dan Friday being assisted by Taylor Ames. We've also got Penny Rakov today and the rest of the CMOG team. So welcome, enjoy, make yourselves at home, and enjoy the glass making. So these are some pieces that Dan made just yesterday. So these are just fresh out of the oven. They're probably still warm. Taylor cracked the annealer doors at like 180 today or something, or did George crack them? But yeah, either way. Okay, fair enough. I feel the same way. Yeah, I feel the same way. Let them touch it first. So the oven cooled down overnight, probably 16 hours. And they're still probably a little bit warm to the touch. But you can see in the annealer over here, he's got a couple of those other basket forms that he's working on as well. So that's our melting furnace. Our melting furnace holds, this one holds about 1,000 pounds of liquid molten glass. The temperature inside the furnace is 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. And so at that temperature, the glass glows that bright orange color. It is clear. It's just so hot that it produces its own light. And again, they're just getting the size exactly right so they can fill that cup without trapping any air bubbles and without wasting any of the color that they've applied. So once we get this glass inside of our stuff cup, Dan actually brought some slides along with him. So he's got a lot of visual information that we'll kind of run through and discuss his background and his family history and how that kind of inspires a lot of his work. So that's a folded up newspaper pad. That's one of our favorite tools to use because it's soft and flexible. So just like those blocks of wood that are behind the bench that are soaked in water, the newspaper is soaked in water and it actually creates a layer of steam between the glass and the tool. George has one over here. This is a brand new newspaper. You can see he's burning it in to get that nice carbon layer on the outside. So into the reheating furnace, we actually have the camera behind the reheating furnace. That's one of our signature pieces of equipment here at the museum. So you can actually see what's happening inside that 2,000 degree furnace. There's no glass in that second furnace. It's just used for reheating as we go. And it looks like we're going to go into the stuff cup at this point. So you want to direct your attention over to the right side of the stage, your left. Every little movement makes a difference. I could just see Dan just kind of using gravity there, even in the furnace, to get the glass to start to stretch. So here we go. You can see the cup sitting inside the oven. He plunges it down, fills the cup, and there we have our color right on the very outside. It's a little brush. There's some kiln shelves in there, so sometimes we pull out a little bit of dust on the bottom there, so he's just going to brush that off before he takes it in for a reheat. We've got a question from one of our viewers. Why do the cold tools not cause the glass to break? Well, it depends on at what point in the process you are at. So if we're nearing the end of the piece and it's right around that 1200 to maybe 1000 degree range, a cold tool would absolutely break the glass. But right now we're plenty hot, so the glass kind of wins that little competition. So Taylor's using the Marver. This is a slab of steel, and it's one of our favorite tools. I think it's always funny to think about a table as being a tool. But it allows us to shape the glass and cool off different sections. So the steel acts like a heat sink. It really draws the heat away from the glass. So it sets different sections up. And when we're making a blown vessel, this is solid glass. This is going to be a solid glass sculpture. But when we're making a blown vessel, we control the wall thickness of that blown vessel by controlling the temperature of the glass before we inflate it. So if we're on a blowpipe, we'll oftentimes marver just the very end of the bubble, and that preserves a little bit of thickness. So again, if you just joined us, this is our visiting artist, Dan Friday. Dan comes to us from Seattle, Washington, where he's a practicing glass artist and also works for the Boathouse, which is Dale Chihuly's studio right there in Seattle. So he's had a long career in the Seattle area. He has glass in a number of different collections and in galleries as well. So he is actively selling the work that he makes. So we're lucky to have him here. It's always nice for us to have visiting artists come through because it's a learning experience for us as well. We're watching techniques that we don't do here on a daily basis. He's going to cut that little bit of extra glass off. And it's kind of hard to see the color at this point because the whole thing has that really bright orange glow. But there is a light coating of the color just on the very outside of that piece. So the reheating furnace, it's also powered with natural gas. There are 4 burners on this unit, 2 on either side, and they're angled at different angles, so it creates kind of this vortex of fire inside of the reheating furnace. And again, right around 2100 degrees Fahrenheit. So I think at this point, Kayla, could you turn on those slides? We can run through some of the images that Dan brought. Yeah, so here's a great example of one of the pieces that he's made previous to coming to the museum. And these are about the same scale as the object that we have down here on the right-hand side. Here's another example. And Dan, did you refer to these as lightning bears? Is that correct? We'll get back to Dan in just a second. He's a little busy. But here's another one of those basket forms that we've got right up here on the table. Another bear. Beautiful vessel there. So we'll kind of touch back into those images in just a little bit. Okay. And
then once we can we'll start building it off the rock. But until then, there's this kind of painful moment where you have to let it start.
So it's just getting the sequence of events from Dan. And you can see a lot of teamwork going on, even at this very early stage. He's cutting in a constriction line that we call the jack line or sometimes the neck line. And that's where we actually remove that object from the pipe a little bit later. So it sets up a weak spot in the glass. And you can see Jeff there, he was using a wooden paddle to flatten the bottom. So that flat plane represents what will be the bottom of this entire totem structure that's going to be sculpted. That's an oxygen-assisted natural gas torch. So the flame right there is probably about 3,000 degrees. So it will allow him to get a really crisp edge, really nice detail right on the bottom. Yeah, so we have a question online, which is more difficult to make, blown vessels or solid work? You know, I think it's like apples and oranges. They're both difficult, just different. Each demands the same level of attention and practice and precision. So this base, this is actually going to be put into our garage. The garage is the kiln on the far right-hand side of the stage, over behind George. And we call it the garage because you can park things in there and forget about them for years at a time, just like your garage at home. But it's a place where we can store items at around 1,000 degrees. So it's about the same temperature as this pickup box over here. And then when we need them again, we'll get them hot and reintroduce them into the 2,000 degree furnace. So we'll have a couple of folks, myself included, just kind of watching those items as they hang out in the garage. So this is a little bit like watching paint dry at this point. We're just letting that glass cool down intentionally. What else do you want to call it? Watching the grass grow. But it's one of the few times that we intentionally let the glass cool down. Normally the name of the game is, you know, get it hot, get it hotter. But here we need it to actually solidify so that it is stable inside of the garage. So George over there, he's going to start the punty. The punty is a handle that will get attached to the base here. And that way Dan can break it off of that first iron and attach it to a handle so that he can finish off the top half. So this is a pretty traditional way of making most objects here in the hot shop. We finish the bottom half first and then flip the piece around 180 degrees and then work on the top. This is our pipe cooler. It's a little water fountain. And after we gather from that melting furnace, the pipe itself gets pretty hot. So we can cool that down, make it safe and comfortable to handle. That's beautiful, Dan. That's right. You never know until the next day. It's a funny thing with glassmaking, you know, until it's cooled down and you can physically handle it, it's hard to realize actually what's happened. So George is making the punty. There's a lot of different variety of punties. This looks like what we call a ring punty or a donut punty. So that's going to attach. It's going to give us a nice wide surface area. So Taylor right now is just kind of taking these quick reheats. We call these flashes. And the quick reheat gives the inside of the glass a chance to cool down while we just kind of give the outside just a little bit of that heat. So it lets the inside temperature catch up with the outside. It's a really important part of working when we have these really thick sculptural objects. So here we go. Looks like George has it ready. He'll bring it over to Dan. Dan's going to attach it right to the center of that base and then get everything lined up. We want those two pipes to be running in the same axis. And it looks like, yeah, he'll put a little constriction in that itself. So anytime we make one of those constrictions, it sets up a place where we can break that glass free. So this punty has to hold on till the very end. But when the time comes to break the whole piece free, we'll do it right on that constriction line. So this is one of the times we actually break the glass intentionally. So we use a little thermal shock. So that's just some cold steel and a little vibration. And here we go. A few drops of water sets up thermal shock, and it should just take a vibration to break it free right on that line. Look at that, pops right off. Let's give a nice round of applause. First transfer of the piece. So he's just making sure everything's on center. Oftentimes when you transfer the piece like that, it has a tendency to fall to one side. So it's kind of on that first reheat that you get a chance to center things up and get them set so everything's running on axis for the rest of the piece. So I just want to read a little bit about Dan Friday here. He's got a little bit of information about his past. I'm just going to read this little clip here at the beginning. Daniel Joseph Friday is a native of the Lummi Nation and a lifelong resident of Washington State's Puget Sound region. Drawing from cultural themes and using modern processes, Friday's work is contemporary in format while maintaining basic Native American qualities. Dan has spent the last 2 decades working with artists such as Dale Chihuly, Paul Marioni, and Preston Singletary. Friday lives in Seattle, where he maintains an independent glass studio, and his work can be found in collections around the world. So with that, let's run those slides again, if we could, Kayla. Kayla's our AV technician upstairs in the booth, and she's in charge of all the camera angles, so here we go. Yeah, so here's another example of Dan's work. And this is a lightning bear. So he has different names for the different types of bears. And maybe we'll get this little stick mic. Would you mind just saying a couple words about the bears, Dan, while we have just a minute?
Testing, testing, 1, 2. Hey, I'm Dan, and these are the bears. You can see this is an Aurora bear. I started making the bears originally. They've kind of changed a bit. When I first started making them, there were feet and quite a bit more detail, but I felt like that took away from the beauty of the glass itself, sort of. So they're just figurative. I really focus on the ears, tail, nose. It's just a few little key elements that make a bear a bear. Bears in my family, my great-great-grandfather, Haystack, is, we're kind of like a, I wouldn't say clan, because that's not the right word, but the bear tribe, bear family, bear clan. You'll see in the slides there's a Hilaire bear picture, and there's some pictures of my great-grandparents. That's a tempura bear. Lightning vase. And you can just kind of click through these two, maybe. Canoe paddle. So I'm from the Lummi Nation, Seattle. I live in Seattle, Washington. My family history locally there comes from the Lummi Nation, which is just below the Canadian border in Bellingham, or right outside in Bellingham Bay, right outside of, right at the very edge of the Puget Sound. And you know, we're a seafaring people, canoes, fishermen. We have our own sort of Coast Salish carving, which is, you may be familiar with more like Vancouver-style totem poles and so on and so forth. But the Coast Salish style is a little more, it has a little less detail and is more of like a silhouette and has what's not traditionally called form line. It definitely has a design of its own. And my work is obviously very contemporary, just being glass. There's a fern basket, very similar to the salmon gill basket that I made yesterday. And as we're going, and so, there's a totem right there. My great-grandfather, Joseph Hilaire, was a really prominent Coast Salish totem pole carver. And you can see in that totem right there, that's what we'll be working on today, is a totem very much like the one you see on the screen, except this one is massive Corning Museum of Glass style. So there's another totem right there. And so my great-grandfather, Joseph Hilaire, Joe Hilaire, was also a great orator and just a cultural conveyor for the Coast Salish people. His totem poles were in the World's Fair in 1962. They just, a friend of mine, Sean Peterson, is actually working on restoring one of Joe Hilaire's poles in Kobe, Japan. And so it's growing up in a family of people that are artists like that. It's always been real inspiring. But the idea of becoming an artist yourself, let alone a glass artist, is one of those things. It's a labor of love in many ways. There's a loom comb. It's all glass. It may look like it's bone, but it's a comb that they use for weaving. Another bear. You can come on back, George.
Thanks, Dan. Dan's definitely multitasking here right now at the bench, shaping glass and managing the mic as well. So, yeah, why don't we cut back to the live feed here, and we'll pick up right with that slide. But, yeah, we want to get some action shots of this sculpting going on right here. This will be the base for a totem similar to the ones we just saw a few slides back. So it'll give you an idea of the scale of these things and how he's going to scale these up. Really working with the heat of the material. You saw how long George was in the reheating furnace, getting everything nice and soft, nice and hot. But it's already time to heat the glass up again. So we only have time for a few gestures before it's right back into the reheating furnace. It's always interesting to see when we have such a nice visiting artist program here at the museum. It's always interesting to see what tools artists travel with. And I noticed Dan has quite a few very unique tools that we'll see him use throughout the process. Different pieces of pipe cut in half, different pairs of pincers, different sort of knife shapes or spatulas, or all these different implements used to make all these details in the glass. So pooling some material, stretching the form out. And just making sure there's no adhered glass. Sometimes when we cut through it, it splashes dust onto the form. So we just want to make sure that's nice and clean so there won't be any texture on the outside. So Jeff is just going to get some rollers that's actually going to turn this base in the garage. Once Dan gets it all sculpted up here. So he's going to continue to use a variety of sized paddles. This tool here, these are called the jacks, and that's usually the most personal of the tools for a glassmaker. It's kind of like the Swiss Army knife of glass tools. We use a lot of different surfaces on it, and they really do become an extension of the glassmaker's hand. So yeah, over here, Dan's making the base over here on the second bench. Taylor's starting the gathers for the bear. And he was just telling me between every gather, he's going to take a flame polish in the reheating furnace, and that's a way of ensuring that there's no residue built up between the layers that would create kind of a veil that you could see between each of the gathers. So really nice, tight quality control to get that perfectly clean surface. Yeah, so we have an online question. Viewer is wondering what the estimate will be for the piece's final weight, and just chatted with Taylor for just a second. We're going to estimate it at about 30 pounds. But you have to remember that's 30 pounds on the end of a 6-foot rod, so it's like 30 pounds of dirt on the end of a shovel. It feels a lot heavier when it's off the end of the shovel. And then you have to factor in that the glass is moving, so you have to factor in all that torque. So this gathering process is there's a lot that goes into it. I think gathering is one of the most personal things that you do as a glassmaker. Everyone's kind of got their own technique, but Taylor's responsibility really is to get a perfectly clean amount of glass with no bubbles or no imperfections trapped between those layers. So he's going to really take his time, get started a little bit early, so that process doesn't get rushed at all. So Dan's got the oxygen-assisted natural gas torch there, just doing what we call flame polishing away any chill marks from the tools. So every time we touch the glass with a metal tool, it cools it very quickly, and it tends to leave a little bit of texture right on the surface. So using that torch, he's able to polish away any of those chill marks without heating up the core of that base. So the piece doesn't start to move around very much, but he's able to just superheat the very surface. And it looks like he's going to add some detail here. He's got one of those specialty tools. So he's going to add a couple of these rings. And I've noticed this pattern on a few of his pieces here. So I was just asking Dan, that's how he marks his pieces. That's his maker's mark. And the reason I wondered is because we've got the same mark on the bear over there. If you take a look at the bear, the same mark is there. So we can see inside of our reheating furnace, if you're seated over here, you might be able to actually look through it. We've got a small window in the back of the furnace, and the window's made of glass, and it's made of a glass called fused silica. So that window has a much higher melting temperature. It doesn't melt until, I think, about 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. So the camera is an ordinary camera, and it's just looking through that window. So it's going to give us some really amazing shots as this piece continues to develop. So Dan was just saying this is one of the larger bases he's ever made. And we were just discussing maybe the final height of the piece. Somewhere around 30 inches tall when we're all finished. George over here, George has the base. He's going to get set up here to put this into the garage. And we've got our rollers set up over here. In the meantime, Dan's going to remove some small bubbles that we get from time to time in the furnace. That's actually in the melt. So again, just another example of quality control, removing any bubbles that Dan considers to be imperfections, something that would make the piece a second quality piece. So you really just have a limited amount of time to do that right when the glass is removed from the furnace to cut away any imperfections or bubbles. So the glass that we have over at the main bench, again, that's going to go into another stuff cup that's heated up in the pickup box. And this is going to be for the bear. So we're going to start building this in pieces. And then this morning, Dan put some other parts into the garage. He has the tree is in there, and there's a fish in this oven as well. So all of that work is going to come out and be assembled hot. There's no glue joints used in this process. It's all hot. So this is what we call the price check. Just eyeballing the size of the cup so that they can estimate how much more glass that they'll need to fill it. So Taylor said he's going to flame polish that gather one more time. Again, just kind of burn away any residue from the block or the newspaper and make sure that surface is absolutely pristine before returning it into the furnace, and that's going to prevent any veiling or any kind of layering within the gathers. I've just got a little heads up from our social media manager, Amanda. She says that on our YouTube channel, which if you're not a subscriber to, now's the time. We're just about to break 100,000 followers on our YouTube channel. So go ahead and click the subscribe button. And we've got a huge amount of content on that channel. So when you get home and you've decided you would like to see some more glass making, just follow the links from cmog.org. Or just search the Corning Museum of Glass on YouTube. So there's that newspaper tool again. It's the local paper, the Corning Leader, folded up, soaked in water. And that tool is soft and flexible, so it's as close as the glassmaker ever comes to shaping the glass, just like you would shape clay on a potter's wheel. And they're just getting it set up for yet another gather before the second stuff cup is picked up out of the pickup box. So as we get set up for this next gather, I wonder, Kayla, would you mind clicking us back onto our slides here for just a moment? So here's another one of the bears, and there you see Dan's maker's mark, I believe, in color. Here's another version of a totem sculpture using that sort of rock formation as a base. And the really nice thing about these stuff cups is you do get that color on the very outside of the piece, which gives you these really amazing optics. Here's another basket form. Oh, there's beautiful fish. Again, you can see the maker's mark on the lower right. The OG bear. That's one of the first bears. So you can see how they've evolved over time. You know, this bear has the 4 legs. And I heard Dan mention earlier that he moved away from that because it just sort of detracted, he felt, detracted from the natural beauty of the material. So you can kind of see the evolution of the form. And there's another example of his maker's mark. More sculptural work. So here's a shot of Dan's family.
She just wrote a book with the Ohio State, the professor at Ohio State, and with a grant from the Smithsonian about my grandfather and her father.
Okay, so this is Dan's aunt who just wrote a book working with Ohio State about your grandfather. Okay, very cool. And this is Dan's grandmother doing some of that traditional basket weaving. And I think we'll just pause on the slides just a moment. I just want to kind of get Dan's take on these. He can probably give us a little more information about them. So let's get back to that live shot. Thank you so much, Kayla. Wonderful job. Thank you. And for those of you just joining us, welcome to the Amphitheater here at the Corning Museum of Glass. We're really lucky today. We've got our visiting artist, Dan Friday, right over here. And Dan is with us for the week. He's doing a residency here at the Corning Museum of Glass. And today he's working on making a large-scale totem sculpture. So we've already got one component finished. We've got the base done. The base is a rock formation. And Dan and his main assistant, Taylor Ames, are working on the second component, which will be a large glass bear. My name's Eric. If you have any questions, let me know. I can see we've got the team over at the garage working on keeping that rock formation warm and stable, but not so hot that it's actually moving around. Any questions in the audience right now? Okay. Oh, great question. We've got a question online. How many components are going to make up the final piece? So we've got the rock base, we've got the bear. The bear is going to be made in 2 parts, so there's 3. We've got a fish, there's 4. And then we have a tree, I believe, that might be 2 components. So at least 5, maybe 6 different pieces when it's all said and done. So they're just getting set up to take the final gather. And again, this process right here really can't be rushed. You know, you don't want to catch any bubbles in between the layers or get any of that residue caught between the gathers. So just making sure the quality is just right. And Taylor's just cooling down the outside of the pipe before he heads into that 2,000-degree melting furnace. We've got a great little gathering animation. I wonder if we could roll that at this point just to give you an idea of what happens inside our furnace. The glass actually sits inside of a ceramic crucible. So Taylor's going to take that gather, push it below the surface of the glass, turn the pipe in one direction, and kind of wind on that material, just like you would gather honey out of a honey jar. And he'll come back out with about 3 times as much material. So here we go, into the molten glass. You can see just winding it up, and he'll come out with a pretty substantial amount. That's a big cup that we have in the oven. So there's our final gather for the stuff cup. Now, an important part of this is shaping it right as it comes out of the furnace. So you notice Dan changing the angle of the pipe, and every little movement really does alter the shape of the form, using gravity in both directions, using the heat from the material and things like centrifugal force to get that to be the perfect shape. You pretty much want to match the shape of the cup. Why cool the pipe before you go back into the furnace and then cool it when you come out of the furnace? Well, because it's really hot. So you want to keep the pipe cool as much as possible. So Dan's going to get that shaped up before he goes into the pickup box. We've raised the temperature of the pickup box a little bit so it doesn't thermally shock the glass when we dip into it. And how are we doing over here, Helen? Looks like we've got this nice roller system figured out. Wow. So we've got these automatic rollers over here at the garage. So these are going to keep the base turning. It doesn't mean we can just walk away, but it means we have a little bit more freedom. Babysitting the babysitter. That's a perfect way of putting it. Yep. So we've got our little mechanical control here, keeping the pipe turning inside the garage. So it's one of the first times we've been able to use that system, but it really does help out, especially when you've got something so heavy. It prevents one person from having to keep that piece turning inside of the garage. So I think at this point we're going to go back into the pickup box and get that cup. I see Penny over there ready to open up the door whenever Dan comes over. So you can see letting that glass kind of stretch, trying to hit the bottom first and then fill from the bottom to the top. And there we have our pickup cup. Yeah, he's working on a bear totem. So the rock formation is the base. This glass right here will be used to make the bear itself. So the bear is going to be kind of standing on the rock like this. It'll be holding a fish. And then there's also going to be a tree at the top, I believe. Yeah. Yep. So we're going to work on this piece. This is probably going to take the better part of the next 2 hours to actually complete. So it's a lot of building these parts and components, and then at the end, we'll put all of those parts together. Yeah, we should probably be working for another 2 hours or so. Yep. We've been working since this morning, but since maybe about noon on this particular piece, getting the parts ready to go. So yeah, this will be the bear, and my understanding is the bear will be made in 2 parts. There's going to be the body of the bear, and then part of that stuff cup color will actually be removed so that Dan can sculpt the head in much greater detail, being that it's not attached to the body itself, and then we'll reattach things later on. So yeah, this piece will take 3 hours, roughly. Dan's been working with glass for about 22 years. So it's really 22 years plus 3 hours to make a piece this complicated. It's a long time. We always tell folks that visit us at the museum here, it takes about 6 years of full-time work to become a pretty good beginner. And then you really start your training. Dan has worked in the Seattle area for some time. He owns his own studio. He also works at the Boathouse, which is Dale Chihuly's studio. He's worked at the Glass Eye Factory in the Seattle area as well, so he has a really wide range of experience. And Taylor Ames, his assistant here today, also works at the Boathouse, has also worked at the Glass Eye Factory. So really a lot of combined experience here working on the floor today. So one of the tricks to hot sculpting is you really have to have a homogeneous temperature in the beginning when you're making really big, drastic moves, and then as it gets closer to the end, you might take shorter reheats as to not distort the overall shape, but to be able to make really detailed movements. So you can just see how much time is spent just driving that heat back into the glass. So George over here, he's going to make a punty because I think, as I mentioned earlier, Dan wants to separate some of this glass so that he can use some of it to make the head separately. So George is making what we call the punty. That's just a little bit of clear glass on the end of a solid stainless steel rod. And that'll kind of catch the extra glass from the larger gather. And then we can store that in the garage as well until needed. So you can see the color change, the color closer to the moil or the pipe. You can start to see the true color a little bit better than the glass off towards the tip. And that's because the glass towards the pipe is cooler. So you're starting to see that color come out. Whereas the glass closer to the tip is reading that bright orange because it is, again, closer to that 2,000 degree mark. Silver Celadon. Oh, I see. It changes quite a bit. Okay. So I was just overhearing Dan talk about the color that we're using. He called it the second magic color, and it's silver Celadon. So all of our colors are made with different elements added to glass, different elements from the periodic table, and some of them really do change dramatically while we're working with them and dependent on the density or the concentration and the amount of the color that we use. So what he's after is kind of this blue to pink transition that he can achieve using this specific color. So we'll look forward to kind of seeing that happen. Looks like Dan's ready to take off this extra bit of glass. George is going to come over with his punty, and they will attach it. So another constriction line, that's just going to be another point where we remove glass. So it's kind of like perforating the paper or the creases in a chocolate bar. It just sets up a weak spot that we can either cut through or use some thermal shock to remove the glass. Looks like they're just going to cut through this one. So while Dan starts to sculpt the bear head, Taylor's going to keep an eye on the main gather here, and that main gather will be for the bear's body. I was just chatting with Taylor a little bit about his experience. He started glass at a young age, taking his first class at age 12, and then took a break, came back to it at age 18 at the Seattle Hot Glass Studio, and he as well worked at the Glass Eye factory, and so has quite a lot of experience for his young age, and it really shows here helping out Dan here today. So we're on to the bear's head. Like I said, the body's just in a holding pattern. So we'll get some close-up shots of the bear's head being sculpted and go from there. So we're just going to grab some calipers. That way we can get a measurement of the bear's head. So once it goes into the garage, Dan will be able to use that as a reference to get the proportions right for the body. I always love watching glass sculptors. We don't do a lot of it on a daily basis here at the museum for the demonstrations. So it's always a treat to have someone skilled like Dan come through, and we can learn some tricks. So over here at the second bench, we're just checking out this color, this silver Celadon, and how quickly it changes under different temperature ranges, and how that color, it's kind of what we call a striking color, whereas the glass cools off, that color really strikes, and you can see it, but where it gets hot, it actually kind of disappears. So right here we're going to see some really quick deft movements to kind of get the proportions set up for the bear's head. The details will come later, but this just kind of divides up the glass into the different anatomy and different anatomical sections of the head. Oh, we have an online question. Is that a gas furnace? And if so, what type of gas? Yeah, it is. It's natural gas. And most of the equipment down here in the amphitheater stage is run on natural gas. The melting furnace, the reheating furnaces, and then we have some electric ovens. The garage is also natural gas run, which is fairly common. But upstairs, we actually have an all-electric glassblowing studio, which is really unusual. And it was developed in partnership with Fred Metz out in Seattle. And that's in our innovation stage. But I'd say, yeah, it's fairly common to have the studio run on natural gas. Sometimes propane is used as well.
All right, we're going to give Eric Snee a break. Everybody out there on the live feed, give him a hand. Yeah, that's right, everybody. Hey, all right. Well, my name is George, and I'd love to answer any questions that you have also. So right now, Dan is actually working on the bear's head, and Eric's going to give him some reheat. So we're getting all set up. He's really thought about this and has really planned it out. Now, he's made many of these pieces before, but not with this team. So Dan's actually doing a week-long residency here at the Corning Museum of Glass here in the amphitheater. And he talked us through how he wants to put this together. So we have a couple of pieces going at the same time. Jeff Mack is at the other bench, keeping the main body warm. So he's flashing it in our small reheating furnace while Dan works on this head. You can really start to see the detail coming out. The ears and the muzzle. Do we have a question? Bob Swidergall is watching. All right. Hey, Bob. We're looking forward to Bob. He's going to come and work with us this summer. Yep, Dan's told us a bunch of stories about Bob. They used to work together back in the day at the Glass Eye. So, yeah. Yes. How long has Dan and everybody on the team been blowing glass for? Well, Dan has been making glass for 22 years, and that's not like working on the weekends. He's been a full-time glass maker for 22 years. He's worked, I would say probably the majority, 7 days a week. So he works full-time for a glass artist named Dale Chihuly, and he's worked for him for about 18 years. And he also has his own shop, his own studio, and has been making his own work for, he said, pretty consistently for the last 5 years. So he said he started selling about the last 5 years. Yeah, he's probably been messing around making his own work for a long time, but really getting serious and selling his work to galleries probably in the last 5. So now Eric Snee, he's been making glass for about 20 years. Chris Rochelle on the other bench, he's been making glass for about 20. Helen also. I think I'm the old guy on the team. I've been making glass for about 28. So. Is glass blowing an easy hobby to pick up? Of course it is. Everybody should try it. It's very easy. You'll be sculpting on your second day. Blobs of uneven, beautiful glass. If it survives. Well. Is it always a team? Well, it's not always a team. I like to say there's a lot of people that have small studios that they'll make, things like holiday ornaments, paperweights, maybe some drinking glasses. When you get into more complicated things, like sculpting glass, like a totem pole, you're going to need a pretty big team. Now, Dan probably doesn't have the luxury of having a large team like this at home, but I bet you he's probably got 2 assistants that help him make work like this. Dan, normally, how many people would be assisting? 3 people. He spends the extra money, and he has 3 assistants, probably including himself. What is Dan's favorite piece that he's made? He really likes making the totems. Yes. I think this is going to be his best one. No pressure, Dan. We've really enjoyed having Dan here this week. It's been a lot of fun. Having a new guest artist come in and watching the way that they work. Yeah, it's a real treat for us. You're over here laughing, Amanda. What's going on? Oh, you have a question you don't want to answer. I think we could answer that. We have a question. How much would it cost for a studio artist to use the studio for a day? It's $5,000 a day. You get the full hot shop. You get the full CMOG team. It's only $5,000 a day. That's a bargain. Dan, how much do you think it would cost to rent Chihuly's studio for a day? He's under contract. He's not allowed to answer that. I'm sure there's a premium to be paid. So they have corporate events at Chihuly's studio. So if you have a corporate event, you can. Has anything ever gone horribly wrong? Never. Nothing ever goes wrong. When things usually go horribly wrong, we turn the reheating furnace off and we go home. All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break from the mic. I'm going to get a drink of water. I'm going to check on the reheating. We have 2 questions. All right, I'll answer 2 more questions before we take a little hiatus. Did Dan start doing this as a hobby? Yeah, so Dan started in the factory. He's been getting paid from day one. Yeah, Dan said he spent a lot of free time working for other artists to learn what he's capable of doing now. I would say most artists that are, very good actually do this whether they got paid or not. What's the second question?
Other than his cultural inspiration, what else was Dan doing?
That's a pretty good question. We're going to let Dan think about that. We'll be back. before I forget, I want to give a shout out to Taylor's mother. I hear she's watching. Taylor says, I love you, Mom. He's being a good kid out here in Corning, going to bed early, getting up early. All right, we have a heckler on the internet, Jim Mongrain from Team Chihuly. He's creeping on you, Dan. Dan wants to know where you get the meatball pizza, Jim. Is it Anelio's or is it Atlas? Yeah, those are our two famous pizza joints here on Market Street, Atlas and Anelio's. In Anelio's, they wear a shirt that says on the back, "Have you had a hot piece lately?" I think we should get a shirt like that.
Jim says Anelio's.
Anelio's. Yeah, we knew it. Hey, Jim, get to work. That's from Dan. Dan, that bear head looks so small inside that reheating furnace. All right, so Dan said he's almost finished with the bear's head, and then he's going to move on to the next step. So there it is. Very nice. We're going to put this on hold also. I don't know if we're going to stick this in the garage. We have a piece of equipment over on the right-hand side of the stage called the garage, where we can actually put pieces of glass and keep them warm. So we have the base of this totem pole already made, and it's sitting in the garage. It's going to be the bottom. So we wanted to make that first. He's going to make all these other parts, and we're going to put them together all at the end. Can we actually show some of Dan's slides? Where's the clicker? Here it is. All right, so here's some slides, and maybe we can show a couple of the totems. Hey, here's a good picture of Dan and his sister, Ray. All right, we all know Ray. Ray used to actually work here at the museum, and right now she's back in Seattle working at a place called Glassy Baby. Boy, Dan, that picture was from a while ago. How old were you guys then? It's in Europe. Let's see if we can find one of these totems. This is one of the bears that Dan actually has made a couple of those. There's one over here on the table. Down here, Dan made this bear on Monday. So that's the scale of the bear. There's a bowl that he has made before. You can see some of these are actually baskets. So these are baskets that he made yesterday. So with this basket series, all of these lines are individual canes. They start out looking like this, and then they're chopped up into specific lengths, set on a pastorelli plate like this. They're all lined out. He makes the pattern, and then we heat them up. He smooshes them together, and then he rolls them up on a collar and blows them into these shapes. Now there is a totem right there. This is similar to what Dan's making right now. So he's got the base made, he's got the bear's head, he's got the fish and the treetop and the owl in the garage. So he actually started making these parts on Monday. He knew he wanted to do something like this for the live stream. I would say if Dan was going to make these from start to finish, it would probably take him a whole day, probably 10 or 12 hours, I bet. And so he's made some parts. Like I said, they're over here in this garage just keeping warm. We have them at about 1,000 degrees. When he gets ready to use them, we'll pick them up and we'll heat them up in the flame, take them to our reheating furnace, get them warm enough where we can assemble them. Yep. I bet you it's going to be about 3 feet tall. There's another one. I like that one. That's cool. I'll go back. If you look on the bear on the back, you can see that red dot. That's actually a Marioni, and that's how Dan signs his pieces with a specific type of Marioni. He actually has some over here on the table. This is what they look like. So he made a bear today. Yep, he heated this up. We stuck it on the back of the bear.
Every one of them's the same.
Yep.
I figured that was the same. Where does he live natively? Like,
He's from Seattle, Washington. Yep, that's where he grew up. All right, we can go back to the live feed. All right, Jeff's putting that piece in the oven. You can see that little hole opening there in the middle of the garage. He's going to stick it in there, keep it warm. We'll put a little brick in there. Now, once he's in there for a minute or two, it's going to cool down enough where it stops moving. So that garage on the hot side is probably about 1,300 degrees. On the cold side, it's set at 1,025. So at 1,025, the glass is still warm, but it's not moving. So we can set it in there, know it's going to stay hot, and make some other parts. So Helen Tegeler, she's cooled the pipe. She's going to bring this glass over, and Dan's going to make, I think, the bear's body out of this. So Taylor's going to take over. Him and Jim will work together to sculpt the body of the bear, and we'll continue on. So now Dan's working on the body of the bear. You can see he's using this folded up newspaper, really using his fingers to squeeze that shape out, flattening one side of it. That paper works really well for shaping hot glass. This is a metal spatula. We call this a tag. Real simple tools, but really versatile. Pair of tweezers. This will be a very stylized bear, I believe. You can see as the glass cools down, it turns cold, makes it very slippery, very hard to grab with the tweezers. Dan's got a mark now. He'll reach in there and pull it right out. Sometimes it really helps to stand outside the bench. Dan's got another pair of tweezers he's going to use to maybe mark it. Oh, yeah. Yep. Those are nice. Now, when they're working, getting ready to sculpt, you can see Taylor will stop and let it fall off center. Then he flips it, and Dan can mark it right in the center. These are special tweezers. They kind of have, they almost look like little blades. It gives them a very sharp line. Dan, what color did you use for the stuffed cup? Metallic Celadon. It's pretty cool because as it heats up, it really turns clear, and you can't. Yeah, it's like a silver glass, silver blue, silver opaque. You can see the transparency of it. Yeah. Now, as they're working on this, they're still trying to keep this relatively centered, you know. So you can see as it falls off center, they flip it over, work on the front half. Once that starts to fall off center, they flip it over and work on the back side. You can see that color starting to come through at the top, next to the moil. Now, once he gets this shaped up, things will start to come together pretty quickly. we'll start putting these pieces together.
All right, so we're going to get this start to warm up all these parts that are in the garage. We've been a lot of babysitting going on over here in the garage. We've got the rock base, we've got all the other components, and so while Dan Friday finishes up that little bare booty, we're going to go ahead and work on getting everything else ready to start assembling. Now, one of the trickiest things about assembling big sculptures like this and projects that have so many different parts is the heat maintenance needed to put everything together. It's really easy to have one of these parts get a little too cold and maybe end up having a crack form. Once those kind of things start to happen, there's not much we can do to fix that. So it's been a lot of heat maintenance over here in the garage. This garage is designed to hold lots of things, just like your garage at home, and you can somewhat forget about it over here, especially when you've got a fancy apparatus like the turning mechanism we set up. It's been keeping everything turning and nice on center. So many little movements just to get those little gestures in all of the parts of the bear. It's one of my favorite parts to look at a tool bench of a gaffer who does a lot of sculpture, because there's always so many very specific tools that are set up. Although, Dan, you got a pretty organized bench for a sculptor for now, but got lots of little toys to choose from, different size paddles to get in nice and tight in those little details. Bigger paddles for broad strokes, and then lots of other texturing tools. A lot of glass workers will go beyond just the tools that are available for sale. They're all handmade as well, so they're all very unique and special objects in their own right. But even just a quick trip to the hardware store or the kitchen store or Goodwill, you can find some really interesting tools. And I've noticed a lot of other sculptors, everyone has at least a butter knife or some sort of knife they've chopped down, sharpened up, and made for very specific applications in sculpture. The addition of this hot torch, though, has got to be one of the most influential shifts in glass here for the sculpture world. Being able to really spot heat specific areas with intense heat really opens up a lot of possibilities. Just using that fluffy torch that we have, that heats things up, but not nearly as specific as that torch. Now earlier, as Dan was making all of the other parts and the head of this bear, he took a couple measurements. And that's really important because when you're working on component sculpture like this, you want everything when you assemble it finally to actually be proportionately correct. And sometimes that can be a little tricky, making that head with imagining how big the body would be or vice versa. And as he said earlier, a small head on a bear doesn't quite look right. A big-headed bear might look a little all right. You can get away with it, but it's not really how it should be. It's kind of cute. I think big-headed things make them look more childlike, but little heads just doesn't, the proportions don't work out. So we're already starting to pull out that rock. This is going to be the base of our totem here, and that's what's been babysat over in our garage for a while. Does that have a color on it? What color we got on the base? Oh, it's the same as that. So the whole thing is made out of the same. So starting to get that rock all warmed back up, cooling down the pipe. When you're hanging out in the garage like that, there's a lot of intense heat coming out of there. So the garage right now is around 1024, 1030. So that's a pretty good amount of heat. And it's a temperature where hopefully the glass won't change when it's in there. So whatever we put in, we can get out looking exactly the same as we put it in there. But when it's attached to a pipe, you need to set it in there and the pipe starts to get hot as well. Now, ergonomically, if we can hold the glass as close to the glass as possible, it's not going to feel nearly as heavy. And I guarantee you when we start stacking all of these things together, they're going to feel very heavy. And so cooling that pipe allows you to just move up on that pipe, hold things a little closer, and save everyone's backs. But we do have a lot of people here today to help out, so we can spread around the heavy lifting. Dan says he normally works only with about 3 people making these objects. Today we've got almost 7 people working on this. So it's a nice change of pace. We get spoiled rotten here at the Corning Museum of Glass. All right, so it looks like we're up to 308 viewers online. We've got a lot of people watching online, which is great because we got a small but mighty crowd here in the house today. Woo! So it's nice to have the global community joining us here for the Corning Museum of Glass live feed with Dan Friday. Such a privilege to have artists come and work with us here at the museum. We've had this ongoing visiting artist program developed over the last few years. And having this brand new space here really has amped up our involvement with bringing artists in. Got a wonderful space here to be able to give them opportunities to try new things, expand their horizons in glass, and get that extra little help when needed. We also bring in a lot of non-glass artists, especially from the Rockwell, and artists who are coming through the Rockwell. We also bring those folks in to work with our team for a couple days. So it's really fun to have such a talented and well-known artist like Dan Friday join us here, teaching us new things, having a lot of fun. So we're going to start assembling some of these little parts here. So we moved over to the small bench for now. And it's nice, too, that we have two spaces to work here. This side bench really close to the garage. It can help us really assemble things fairly quickly right up with the objects in that garage. All right, so all this prep work that's been happening over the last day and this morning and this afternoon, we've got it all ready to start putting all the parts together. This is going to be a totem, so a nice tall collection of items put together into this totem form. And besides the rock being our base, our bear will be holding up the rest of our objects. So just taking a little time to mark the pipe, make sure that everything is lined up. Sometimes in the heat of the moment, you get a little quick movement. You got to move fast to make sure everything's stuck together. And it's really easy to lose track of what's up and down when you're assembling a lot of different parts. So anything you can do to help yourself out, points of reference, always helpful. This is also the part where we're going to start putting these things together all on one pipe. So it'll start to really build up the weight of this piece as we assemble it. That's one of the reasons why you make all the parts ahead of time, so you don't spend a lot of time just flashing that big heavy object while you're making all the different parts. Well placed. Nice and hot with that torch. We don't want all the parts moving. We just want the connections to be nice and warm. If those are at all cold when you put them together, they won't truly bond. Only hot things will bond together. And so you want to make sure that they are one piece of glass. Now the very top of this bear does have a constriction line near the pipe, because this is where we're going to break it off. And so putting in a weakness, a nice tight constriction line will help in that separation, but we wouldn't want it to separate at the feet at any one point of this collection. Going for the tap method today, just chipping away just a little bit. And a little water to thermally shock the top of our bear body to break it free. There we go, beautiful job. First part together. Yeah. I know there's thunderous applause in the audience there online. There's only a few folks here. But welcome everyone who's coming into the theater. We got a lot of people showing up here in the amphitheater. You've joined us on a very special day and a very special time of day. We're here with Dan Friday, and we're doing a live feed on the internet to across wherever you've got access. You can connect with our website and watch some of the action that happens here at the Corning Museum of Glass. And today we have Dan Friday working on a totem. We've made all the parts that are needing to go into making this totem earlier today and yesterday. And so now it's getting to a little bit more of the exciting part where we can start to assemble things together and combine this all together into be a very tall, solid sculpture. What color is the bear? Now, the bear is a really fun, unusual color. He still hasn't told me the number of it, if you're for those glass geeks out there, but it's a high silver color that's more of a chameleon color. So when you're looking at it, in some light it will look kind of amber. Some lights it'll look a little bit more milky and go kind of a greenish color. So it has a lot of really interesting qualities. The metals kind of come to the surface, and where it's thick, it's where it's thin. When you're looking through it, when you're looking at the outside or the inside, every view will be different. So it's hard to really classify it as a specific color, more than just a little bit of a rainbow chameleon on the surface. Now, all of the parts that we're making here today as well, they've all been made by using stuff cups. And so you blow out a bubble, and you open that bubble up to be a cup, and then you stuff it full of clear glass and then make the sculpture out of that. So the color that you see is not on the surface, it's actually sandwiched just under the surface of the clear. And so it looks like it is solid color, but we're really just looking at a thin layer of color on that piece. All right, for all you glass geeks out there, it's K19 for the base rock that we're working with. He said it looks amber, but when you stretch it real thin, it goes a little bit pink. Here we got our little head. So just torching those two items together, making sure when they stick it together, hopefully it will be facing the right way as well. But just doing a bit of a size comparison there. So if anyone out there has any questions, especially here in our audience, definitely feel free to ask, let us know. But we're working here again with Dan Friday. He's from Seattle, born and raised in that area, and he's been working in the glass field for over 20 years. So a lot of really wonderful experience. Works in Chihuly's studios and various other studios in the area, owns his own shop as well, so does a lot of work at home and has been producing amazing work for many, many years, but really concentrating on some of this specific work for the last maybe 5 years, he said. So if you want to check him out online, we got fridayglass.com, and I'm sure he's connected with all the social medias, so you can follow him and find out the final look of this piece. We will be posting an image of this on our website, I imagine, when it is complete. And you can keep track of us here at the Corning Museum of Glass online. So we got a question online here. It says, how hot can it get in the studio? You know, we don't have any thermometers around here, but I know that in general, this studio can stay a little colder than most because we have air conditioning. So if you see on the floor here in the front of the stage, on occasion the cameras pan around, you might be able to see some yellow boxes on the floor, and those are actually air conditioning vents. So once again, very spoiled here in the Reheating Museum of Glass studio. So we can put in a little bit of cooler air into the room if necessary. Now, it is a very big room. We do have a lot of furnaces here burning. So it can get very, very hot, especially George has probably got one of the hottest jobs right now standing right in front of that reheating chamber. That's over 2,000 degrees, so it's radiating a lot of heat coming out of there and off of that piece. So it's really important for glass workers to, of course, stay hydrated, kind of taking breaks whenever possible, trading around some of that lifting and heavy responsibility to try to take care of each other, take care of the piece. But in general, it's never really sweltering in here compared to an outdoor shop or a lot of other shops I've worked in. Now, one of the other things that can help us keep it a little cooler in here, you might notice whenever we're heating in that reheating furnace, they'd have hinged doors. We can open and close those doors to accommodate larger and smaller work. So not only for energy conservation, trying to keep those doors closed as much as possible to conserve as much heat inside of that furnace as possible, it also can help contain that heat within there. It's also all the hot shop equipment here is located underneath a hood. So there's suction, really sucking a lot of that hot air out of the building and putting it right outside. So if you step outside, you can feel some of the heat from our furnaces out there as well. But we do everything we can. This studio was very specifically designed to be a hot shop, and so there was a lot of thought put into the airflow and the exhaust systems and how everything comes together to make it a comfortable and amazing place to work. How tall will the totem be when it's finished? This might be the biggest one. Yeah, he said it might be the biggest one yet. He's made a lot of these in preparation for the one he's making here, and usually that does turn into the case. When people come to the Reheating Museum, they make the biggest one they've ever made because they've got George to pick it up, for one thing. And we also have that very large furnace there, too. So we're bringing out the big guns today, not only the physical labor, but also the furnaces we're working out of. This particular one, I could probably sit Indian style inside, cross-legged, and be able to stand up. It's a pretty big space. It even has sliding doors. Instead of that last opening of the hinge doors, it has sliding doors that open up even further without blasting all of the heat from those doors onto you. So right now we've only got the bear, but we also in the box have at least a tree that has a trunk on the tree. We've got a fish, and I think there's one other part. Is that a little bird for the top? Is that what's the... Little owl on the top. Nice. So we still have a lot of components. Now this bear is going to be the biggest feature of this totem. So it's definitely the most height involved in the rock and the totem. But the tree's probably another 6 or 7 inches on there. And then the fish and, of course, our little owl is probably about 4 or 5 inches. But we are kind of limited by not just the size of the pipes. We need to be able to pick up and manipulate this work. But if you were to build it too tall and it wouldn't go back into that furnace to reheat the whole time, that could cause problems. Because if you max out the size of that reheating furnace, then there's no way to keep the piece equally warm. Now we're always getting whatever's furthest away from us, it's easiest to keep the hottest. So we're building from the pipe down or the pipe up, depending on how you want to think about it. But we're trying to build it one piece at a time so that we can work right now on the very top of the body. But if it starts to stack up together and gets too far and touches the back wall, then maybe that moil area by the pipe would get too cold and start to crack. Yeah.
How long can you keep glass warm?
All right, we got another question online. How long can you keep glass warm in the garage? Well, I guess with proper maintenance, as in watching and babysitting and making sure that it's maintaining the temperature of the furnace itself or the garage of itself. You're rotating it on occasion to make sure it's not creating any kind of flat spots and you're keeping it in that sweet temperature. You can pretty much leave it in there indefinitely because the glass is being held at a temperature where hopefully it won't crack, hopefully it won't move. So if you can find that sweet spot, it can stay in there pretty much indefinitely. Now, you don't really want to leave it in there unmonitored because if it does start to get a little too warm, it could start to shift and pick up dirt from the base of the garage and things like that. So typically we would load the work that we're going to make that day in that garage, warming it up slowly, and then trying to use it all that same day. Yeah. Most of the time for glass as well, since glass expands when it heats and it shrinks when it cools, you need to have it go through a proper cooling cycle to get it to survive. So even if we had extra objects in that garage at the end of the day, we wouldn't want to leave them in there and just shut the garage off. We would actually pull them out, put them into the annealing oven, allowing it to cool down really slowly to make sure it would survive that entire cooling process. But this entire piece will be put away at the end into one of our annealing ovens, allowed to cool really slowly. Since it's solid, it's probably going to be in there for a few days at least. I know it's really big, but it's not the size of the piece we're looking at, it's the thickness of the piece that we're looking at. So if this were hollow and just as big, we could cool it maybe a little bit faster than where it is that solid mass. Now, with all the parts and the pieces and all the strange connections, that can also cause some unusual cooling rates. And so you'd want to go nice and slow just to make sure that all those little parts were cooling evenly as well. All right, you can already start to see in the legs of that bear some of that kind of schmaltziness coming to the surface. These colors are really amazing. Nice little belly rolls. Do you folks out in our stands have any questions here today? So as Dan's been working, he's doing a lot of little touches with the metal paddle. And I think this is one of the hardest things when you're working with glass and you're trying to carve something out of a solid mass, is to really try to think about what all those little parts. You need to kind of push the glass to have an area to move forward, and being able to compress it. And even the smallest touch will leave a mark on the glass, and it's very difficult to remove. So it's very economy of touch to make sure you get that. Actually, let me come up because I can't quite hear you. I can come to you. It's just a little too loud down here with the thing. We got a question from our audience here. All right, so there's our question. He said, I mentioned there's lots of components, and the question is he going to finish it today? Yes. In theory, he is going to finish it. I'm not sure if we'll come in right at the 4 o'clock mark. We might go a little over. It really kind of depends. But if we do somehow go over and we're not able to live stream the complete finished product, we will definitely have an image of it on our website within the next couple of days. Well, it's going to take a couple of days to cool down. But yes, once you start a piece like this, now he could make those components and anneal them all and bring them all back up. But we've got them all hot. We've got them all made. So that right now, yeah, they're all in the garage. They're all awaiting their moment of truth to pop out and get onto this piece of glass and come together as the beautiful sculpture. So yes, if all goes well, it'll all be completed before we walk away here today. All right, so we got another question from online. Just curious about glass and what it's made out of, what kind of glass we're working with. Now, our glass is a Spectrum product glass for those glass people out there, but for those of you who don't know what that means, that's just a manufacturer of glass. For our glass, we're part of a family of soda lime glasses, and those are probably the most common types of glass you're going to come in contact with. It's going to be your soda bottles, it's going to be your pickle jars, your windows. It really is a big category. And so each formula for glass, when tweaked a different direction, will give you different working properties. So for our glass, being soda lime, it's got silica as the main former. And then we have soda ash and limestone added to it. That's where we get the soda lime title. So the soda ash is a flux that lowers the melting temperature from about 4,000 to closer around 2,000. And then we've got the limestone, which is a stabilizer. And so if you look at really ancient glass, they might not have had the right kind of balance of stabilizers, and the water has started to actually penetrate into that glass and eat it away. And so by adding that limestone, it creates a more stable glass. Now, ours is meant to play with it. It's designed specifically for the glassblowing community and the fusing community. So it is a really soft glass. It's very malleable. It stays warm for long periods of time, as opposed to perhaps something that would be used in a bottle factory where you want it to set up really quickly and produce thousands of them a minute. And so you could use that kind of glass to blow glass. You just have to work really fast, and you might not be able to get the same kind of effects. But there's lots of different kinds of glasses out there. But the glassblowing community really has a handful of them, the few manufacturers that have come up with formulas that we've all decided are fairly stable. And so we can order our glass from those manufacturers. Now, if we want to make colored glass, then we would just add different metal compounds and oxides into those raw materials in their powdered form to be able to create various colors. Now, we have one small color tank here at the museum that we will on occasion melt a little bit of color here and there. But typically, we only purchase our colors separately. Once again, the manufacturers have it all figured out. They can work with the large furnaces required, all the raw materials in a safe manner, something that we're not necessarily all set up to produce. And so we just buy our colors separately and then can add them in. Now, all of the color that Dan has used today, he's using our clear glass as the base, but he's used chunks of solid color to create all of the colors that you see on the object. And so took a solid chunk of color, started with that, gathered clear glass over top of it, blowing out a bubble, opening that bubble to be a little cup, and then stuffing that cup with a lot of clear glass and having that whole package back onto a solid pipe to be able to sculpt it into the different components. So the colors that you're looking at, one, they're going to look a little different because they're hot as opposed to when it is back to room temperature, but it's also just a really thin layer right underneath the surface of all of these objects. So really good questions online here today. Keep them coming if you're interested in something. We'll do our best to answer it for you here today, especially those of you live in-house. We really appreciate you coming to the Corning Museum of Glass. I hope you've enjoyed your day so far. But lots of things to see and do here at the museum. But this is a really special thing. We don't often have visiting artists with us, and we've been very privileged to have Dan Friday with us all week. He's still, it's only got a couple more days left with us. He's here through Friday. So if you are in the local area and would like to come and hang out with us, definitely come and watch Dan work. He's will be here until 4 o'clock on Friday. So we want to make sure and get anyone who's interested. Oh, that's a really good question. So can you rework a soda bottle or a window into something else? Now, in general, I will say that glass is infinitely remeltable. So yes, I could take a soda bottle and I could pick it back up and I could get it hot and I could cut it, or I could dent it, or I could put a texture on it and I could make it into something else. If I wanted to add more things to it, however, I would need to make sure and have the same kind of glass, because all glasses will melt, but not all of them will cool properly together, because each one with a different formula also has a different coefficient of expansion, which means the rate in which it expands and contracts, or the amount that it grows and it shrinks as it heats and it cools. And so I could take a soda bottle and I could, or a pickle jar, and then I could try to stick a handle made out of a soda bottle on it, but as they went to cool, they would most likely shrink at different rates and pop apart and break. And so if I wanted to make a sculpture out of soda bottles, I would need to make sure I get all the same soda bottles, and I would need to melt all that glass together and hope that the manufacturers are close enough that we can end up having something survive that cooling process. But yes, it takes a lot less energy to remelt glass than it does to melt from its raw materials. And so it's to our advantage to be able to recycle glass as much as possible. Now, it is possible if you take a particular kind of glass and you melt it for too long, for too hot, it can actually start to change the chemistry of that glass. You start to kind of cook out the things that make it the kind of glass that it is. So even our glass, we'll recycle as much clear glass as possible, putting it back into our furnace. But if we're not careful about finding the balance of the amount of recycle and the amount of fresh new glass, we can start to see cords form in the glass. Now, cords are just kind of thicker bands of glass, kind of look like snot bubbles in there. It's really unattractive. It's really difficult to blow out nice even forms with cordy glass because it is moving slightly differently. The chemistry has changed and it's a little bit adjusted. But here we've got another size comparison. You can see he took the top of that bear, what looked like the top of the bear, and split it down the middle. And so those are going to form the arms on our bear. And so now we just need to get the arms pulled back into the right position, and then that head can fit right into nestling on those shoulders. This is a really fun way of working with the solid glass. He could have also added bits to this object, so the arms could have just been added additions, but building from the core, getting everything from one solid mass, this is going to be a better way of keeping all of the color consistent, because those little bits, if they were to add separate bits, we would have had to make another stuff cup for each arm and kind of work through getting all of that color. And so cutting up the same blob of glass in multiple ways is a great way to create all that consistency in the object. It always kind of looks funny. I really love, as you're building sculpture, all these moments of strange shapes coming off of everything. So it kind of looks a little like ears hanging off the top of this body, but this will be nice little arms when he's finished. So just doing a little refinement, I think, on the head of the bear. All right, so we're getting ready to assemble this head here. So we got Taylor. He's also from Seattle. He's joined us here with Dan Friday. He's a regular assistant in Seattle, so he's the resident expert on how to work with Dan and how to make all of this happen. So he's going to get in and do some of this final detailing, prepping of the temperatures and everything together. Also on the team, we got George Kennard here. He's being our hired gun for lifting here this afternoon, carrying this piece back and forth. Eric Snee helping out as well. We got Jeff Mack. Penny Rakoff's also joined us as a somewhat collaboration. They've been working together on some Marioni patterns for some bears this week as well. My name's Helen Tegeler. I'm doing some narrating right now. Played babysitter early on. But this is a really fun thing about having such a good team, such a big team. We can all rotate through, kind of jump in wherever necessary to help each other out and make sure that this is a successful piece. All right, there we go. Great shot there of the action. Now, once this has been attached, you can break free that punty, but right now he's just using this as good leverage, making sure it's got just the right heat, just the right connection, and the right positioning. There we go. Nicely done. Now our bear has a head. Even the bear's happy. He's like, yay! Arms up in the air, all excited. So you can see it's still a little soft. There's just a little bit of movement. Now, the key was that they made a lot of heat only in that connection. So he can push and pull and prod at that head or the body without disturbing the form, but has that nice hot connection to help move around to get the right gesture. Not only is proportion really important when you're working with sculpture, but it's also the gesture. That really tells the story and really illustrates what you're trying to communicate with the animal or the object. And now that we got all the parts for this bear, we need to clean up that punty mark. Anytime you break something free where it was connected, it always leaves just a little bit of a scar mark, whether it's from that transfer punty, a little bit of excess left on there. Sometimes you purposely leave a little bit on the end for stability, and then you'll actually cut that off later. You really want to be careful when you separate it not to get it to take a divot out of your object. So it's better to leave a little extra and then go back in and kind of push it into place or remove any excess from that transfer or that punty. So a little bit of cleanup, a little bit of maintenance. You can see they're doing a lot of torching on the back end of our piece as well, right by the pipe. That big moil, that excess glass that's right on the pipe, we need that to hold onto our piece, keep everything onto the iron. And since it's the furthest thing away from the heat most of the time, it has a tendency to get really cold. And so if that were to get too cold, it could crack and pop off and the whole thing would fall. So that's really our foundation. Our stability is right there on that pipe. So maintaining a lot of good heat, getting the torches onto it, keeping it a little bit of color is really going to give us the best insurance policy to be able to continue shaping that piece. You can also start to see as it slightly cools, we got quite a color difference between the bear and the base itself. So this will still be a very different looking object when it's finished. The colors will come through in a very different form when they are fully room temperature and cold. But we can already start to see those colors developing a little bit when we got the colder. Oh, looks like we're going in for our fish. Fishy. So you can see a nice hot bit of glass. So this is just the punty transfer. He's picking it up with fresh hot glass. And this garage is designed to have two sides, basically. So this garage is designed very specifically to have two temperature zones at least. So you've got the flame on one end, and then you've got no flame on the other side. So one side of that garage tends to get hotter than the other. So when you're doing things in somewhat long-term storage, you'll keep them over on the right side of that garage. Keep them stable. They won't get too hot. They won't change or anything. And then you move them over to the left side, closer to that flame, when you're getting close to the time that you want to start picking them back up. Since they are at a temperature around 1,000 degrees, give or take, depending on which side you're in, that's a temperature where the glass isn't going to change. But if it's too cold and we pulled something straight out of the relative cold side and went straight into one of our reheating furnaces, it'd be too much temperature change too quickly and they would crack. And so instead you move it over to the left side, you hold it near or above that flame for a few minutes to really get it as warm as you can in that environment before you go for your final flash of heat. Now if they wanted to attach this and get it moving, once you get it back onto a pipe, once you get it back into that reheating furnace, you could get it as hot as you wanted to, get it moving around or whatever you need to continue to manipulate that object. But he's pretty much finished all of these components. They are as they are, and they are pretty much finished. So it'll just be a matter of assembling these things together rather than continuing to work on those forms. So Taylor's back over here on babysitting duty, warming up our little fishy, while Dan starts working on the arms of our bear. This was all separated away from that solid mass on the pipe. And so he's just starting to partition out what will be his paws, what will be his arms, and his shoulders. This is, again, one of the tricky things of working with sculpture is kind of guessing how much of that mass you need to pull out to be able to leave enough arms on there. If he didn't have enough mass separated out, then it could have little teeny arms, and there's not much you could do to add glass. Now, you can always take glass away. So if the arms were too big or too long, he could trim away some of that excess. But it looks like he did a great job on pulling the proportions that he'll need for this particular bear. Yeah, I like the gestures of this. Very playful totem that he's putting together. All right, so our fish has gotten warmed up in that hot side of the garage long enough so it's going to make its debut. Come on out and go for a good heat in our reheating chamber. You got enough room? So it's always it's a delicate balance when you're working with this garage parts. Not only keeping things in the right temperature, but also picking them up, making sure they're in the right position, cleaning off a little dirt on occasion, trying not to do anything to shock the glass. It's actually, I think, one of the more stressful jobs on the team is being the garage monitor and pulling things out of that garage. There's really a lot of skill involved in this whole entire process. We've got a lot of experience here on the team, and that really does help. Good assistants are also good gaffers and vice versa. And so it's really great to be amongst so many talented folks here today and seeing this come together so smoothly. Everybody seems real chill and relaxed and taking it one step at a time. Just did a quick little peek in that reheating furnace. It's got a really fun, unique view of the inside there. There's a camera located behind a very specialized piece of glass. Corning's one of the only place that has that special view, but I'm just kind of curious how much more real estate we had in there to build our bear totem on, and there's tons of room in there, so you can keep stacking things taller and taller. Yep. All right, so we're starting to really put these final touches here on this assemblage. We got our fish attached now. Once again, has just a little bit of a mark left from that punty, so he'll work on the gesture, making sure it's really well contacted down. And then clean up any items that need to. Now the tweezers themselves, those were warmed as well. Anything can shock the glass, and so you have to be really careful about even what you touch the glass with as you're working. So all these metal tools, they don't stick to the glass because they're slightly colder, but they can shock the glass if they're too cold. So a lot of times you'll warm those up just a little bit. And Penny was definitely doing the warm up on those before we did the attachment. It's like this. He's really pushing down that fish all along the bear's hand, so you really feel the weight of that fish. The curving down and around. It's also important to keep things centered. By the time you finish, you want to make sure the balance is correct. If you lean too far one way or the other, then of course it's going to be very difficult to stand this up proud. So paying really close attention to, as they stack all these items, how the balance is going to work out on this piece as well. already starting to talk a little bit more about the heat maintenance. We got a pretty solid mass of glass here, and that stays fairly warm when you go to reheat. But those little tips, there's different parts that'll start to cool down, like the tip of his nose, the tip of his little tail, the edges of the fish, his little head and tail. And of course that punty, making sure there's still enough heat. There's a lot of little adjustments being done.
Sit down and just hot torch the bottom. Don't melt the points of the roots out. Just point the hot torch straight at the bottom. Turn. All right. Quick flash. We're ready for you, Ted.
All right, next comes the tree trunk. Got a tree that's made in two parts. That way it can be the right color and the right shape. So that's once again been flashed many times. You can see where the heat is in those two items, making sure that they bond together nice and strong. Really wiggling it around, making sure all those tree roots really get seated well onto that fish. All right, nicely done. They make it look so easy, folks. Make it look so easy. This is one of my favorite parts as well, working here at the Corning Museum and being able to see that inside view. Especially when we're working with animals and objects, they really get a lot of character when you see them from the other side dancing around in that furnace. That furnace is around 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit, or about 1150 Celsius. So from our angle here looking into that, it's really just a big glowing box. It's very difficult to kind of see what's happening in there, but the camera just sort of filters out some of the light and we get a good view of that inside opposite end of our piece. So Dan's going to start picking back up the top of this tree now. A couple more final pieces to be added. All right, so we got another question online. It asks if the connections between these objects, they've been heated, they've been connected, if the connections are just as strong as if they were made from a solid mass. Now, I would say in general, no. Each connection has a potential for being a weakness in that material. Because of the bonding of those two elements together, there's always a little bit of temperature difference between those two surfaces. And so any kind of differential, any kind of weakness that we put into the material, whether it's a crease or like a jack line, anything that would allow us to create a separation line, and those joints are just as delicate as this. Now we are using the the torch. So we're getting some really good heat on that. We're getting some pretty good bonding together. So I would say, if anything, it's the size that might be a weakness, like the little connections of the wrists, you know, those kind of areas are also weaknesses in that piece. Anything that would have a dent in it, or an impression, or the start of a area to crack could potentially be a problem. But that's why we're also doing, again, a lot of heat maintenance, being really conscientious about where those potential weaknesses might be. And so especially in the final moments of the forming of this piece, once we get all the pieces assembled, we'll just spend some time flashing and torching, flashing and torching, allowing everything to sort of stabilize, let the core be nice and stable so that it doesn't change shape once we put it into the oven, but also to make sure that those little parts are kept warm. We'll be doing a lot of flashing on that connections, on the little tip of his nose, on his little tail hanging out there. His little booty's going to get too cold. So we need to make sure all of that has enough temperature before we put it away to help hopefully avoid any of those weaknesses, any of those potential problems. But even when you're cooling it in the annealing oven, all those different parts, they start pulling and shrinking at different rates. And so that's part of why all the maintenance, the heat maintenance, but also part of why we schedule the downswing in a particular way that we do, to assure that everything is taking into calculation all those little angles, all those little connections, all those thickness differences, so that hopefully it would cool down without any cracks forming. It is possible to have things, not even when you come out of the oven, but even much later, sitting out on a table for weeks, and all of a sudden something can pop. And if it's not properly annealed or cooled down correctly the first time, or giving those basic maintenance heats while you're forming the piece as well. Get that out of your way. All right, there's our lovely tree. This was made yesterday, so it already was cooled down and then brought back up to temperature. But all those little parts were picked from a solid mass. So again, all of the parts that we're working with today are all stuff cups. And so the color was using solid bar color, making little cups, and then stuffing it full of clear, and then taking those clear, those combined masses, and making each one of these individual objects and components. And so we got a nice dark tree to add to the top. Now, one of the things I really love about sculptural work as well is that you can ask 10 different glassworkers to make a tree, and they're going to give you 10 different versions of their interpretation of a tree. So this is really where you get that artistic license, coming up with the basic gestures, the small components. Not too many people are working with photorealism in glass. They're not trying to make exact copies. There are some folks that do, but a lot of times even those exact copies have just a little bit of the personality added by the artist. So it's really fun to see all these parts come together. So here's the top of our tree. Again, really pushing. It's really just the connection points that have been heated substantially to make sure that they're connected well together. But we want the rest of the piece to be stable, especially that stem or the trunk of the tree becomes a bit of a pivot point here. So George is really careful about the maintenance, watching how all the movement of this tree. Is a lot of different parts to keep track of. Is that shield all right, or is it starting to get in your way? Straight on. It's like it was turned on a lathe. Dan says he could stop right there, or we've got one more piece. I think it's well worth taking the time to put on that extra piece. We get a little bonus live stream here today. Now again, we're working with Dan Friday. If you'd like to check him out, he's got a wonderful website and lots of social media activity. Dan Friday or FridayGlass.com. We will also have images of this and some of the other work that he's been with us all week long making. On the website, cmog.org, CorningMuseumofGlass.org. We also have, of course, Facebook, Instagram, all of the social medias. You can check out all the fun and exciting things that are happening here at the museum. But Dan's going to be with us here until Friday, so if you are in the local region, I highly suggest you come and hang out with us for a day or two. Some of this work is pretty thick, so it won't be out for a few days. But we already have a few of the items that we made with him earlier in the week. Some of his basket series are out and available to take a look at. Much of Dan's work is influenced by his family heritage. The Lummi tribe up in Northwest. The bear is his family symbol, so it uses a lot of bears in his work, a lot of owls, a lot of nature that you see up in the Northwest. Especially these trees are really a great addition to this repertoire. Dan comes also from a long line of craftsmen. His great aunt was a basket maker, and that's what influenced him starting that basket series. She has some of her items even in the Smithsonian, but has been a long standing member of the community. And he said a few years ago when she passed, he was really excited to start doing work in her honor and making some of that permanency from the basket patterns, that the baskets themselves, being made of organic materials, would eventually disappear. So of course, as we all know, glass doesn't really go anywhere. So it's really wonderful to see him extend those designs, those traditional designs in all of that basketware. So check out the website, fridayglass.com, and take a closer look at some of this fantastic work that we've been making here today and all of the things that have led up to this residency here with Dan. And we did have a question about the colors earlier online. And do keep in mind, some of the colors that you're seeing right now are fairly close to what they will be when they are cold. That bear will have that same kind of milky luminosity to it. You can see that kind of smokiness coming through now that it's getting just a little bit cooler. The base is a really nice pink and amber color. So that one's probably going to be a little bit brighter. And then this tree will stay as a nice dark green. You want this one left? All right, so we started leaving the hole, the doors of the hole open a little bit. We're getting to these final stages. We got one more element to add, our beautiful owl that's still in our garage over there. But the rest of this piece needs to start really getting stable. And when you get all these pivot points and all these different parts, that means if you get the whole thing too hot, everything will start moving from the weight of the glass, and it's very difficult to get it all back on center. So at this point, it's just quick flashes, maintenance of heat, and trying to avoid getting any one part of this too hot to be moving. Going back into that garage now for our little owl. Once again, the right side of this oven is a little bit colder than the left side. You want me to turn that torch off? Don't want to catch our artist on fire here. He's backing right up to a torch. So Dan's going to switch this over to the hot side. It's always a delicate maneuver there. One of the other things I really love to see on this particular piece and a lot of Dan's work is the signatures that he adds. So at the very base of this piece, there's a tiny little stamp, and that's really his signature. You might also see on some of the things online, there's a bullseye effect Marioni, little different colors layered on top of each other. It's also a calling card of Dan Friday. If you're from the Seattle area, you might even actually see a few of those stickers around the city. And he kind of leaves them a lot of places that he goes as well. It's just been a signature of his for many years, this bullseye imagery. So once again, a split team here. Taylor's going to start watching the owl as our hot shop team gets on that heat maintenance. So this particular totem is probably going to be the biggest one he's ever made, Dan said earlier. So we are really maxing out the amount of glass that we are able to put on the end of the pole here. This is one of the exciting things about bringing guest artists into this space. With the team and a few extra people and the freedom to be able to explore, they can really start to push exactly what they've been doing either in their own practice or trying new things. So this particular design is something that Dan's been working on and developing over the years. And so it's great to have a few extra hands on deck to be able to really expand that, make some nice tall work. We find in general that when people come here to the museum and they see the big team and the big hole, they say, hey, let's make this big thing. So we always seem to get a lot of requests for large objects, which is really exciting for us here at the Kearney Museum of Glass. Dan, as a professional artist, was also very well prepared for this residency. He showed up with a giant crate full of parts and components, Marioni and cane, all the different things, the tools, the toys, everything he would need to be able to really facilitate this, which is a great use of his time. If he would have shown up and had to pull all the Marioni and all the cane and do all the prep work, we would have still been pulling cane and Marioni and getting everything ready to be able to make any of the objects that we've already made this week. So really thinking ahead, really planning, taking good advantage, shows the professionalism and the experience that he has as a glass worker in the glass community. Being a glass artist really does require a lot of diversification. very difficult to just make your own work all the time and be able to make a living. So a lot of artists do diversify and start out with a lot of assisting roles, maybe a lot of teaching roles. And Dan has definitely been one of those artists who works very, very hard out in Seattle, almost 7 days a week, working for a lot of different artists, working full-time for the Chihuly team out there at the boathouse. Really starting to focus on his own work professionally here in the last 5 years or so. It's been really fun to watch that development and finally see a little time in the sun after so many years of working so hard. The final pinnacle for our tree and our totem here today, the little owl. Wise choice, giving it just a few more seconds to set up other places and get that little bit hotter for that connection. All right, we're at that final pinnacle now. Just the right heat, just the right balance. Nestle that little owl right onto the top of our tree. All right. And of course, everyone has their cameras out getting those last-minute photos and videos. Keep an eye on our website and all the social media for the team. There'll be lots of images up of this exciting piece. really taken a lot of time, even with the smallest of details. They can make a big difference. You put all this time and effort into such a large piece, and leaving a big chunk on the end or not cutting it off in the right heat. If you get it too hot and burn the glass, or if you cut it with dirty, dull shears, it can leave a mark on the surface. So even down to the final detail, you really need to take your time, make sure it's right. But now that we have this entire thing assembled, he's going to clean up the top of this owl, and we just got a little time to once again return to that heat maintenance. I keep mentioning this over and over, but this is really a key thing to the success of this piece. Putting it together, making all the parts, that's really just part of the equation. Without having all the right temperatures, glass does not like to cooperate. In preparation, we got Taylor here. Taylor Ames has come from Seattle to work with Dan Friday. They work together a lot out in Seattle, so quite the dynamic duo here with us this week. But he's getting all ready, starting to get dressed up. It's going to be his job to put this piece away into the annealing oven, allowing it to cool down really slowly. And so we want to make sure that he's as comfortable as possible. It's a lot of weight, it's a lot of heat coming off of that piece. And so we're going to dress him up in all the silver suits here today. So he's got a jacket and a hood and some heat protective gloves that will clothe him in. This will allow him to not only grab hold of this piece, but also stick his head and body into that 905-degree oven. So it's a nice hot radiant heat, and you can imagine how quickly you would catch on fire or lose some hair if you're in there. So we want to make sure that we protect him so he's nice and calm and can set this down in a very controlled fashion. We're also here on the team that working here at Corning. Of course, we got George Kennard being our strong man today, really carrying this back and forth from the bench to the yoke. Takes a lot of time to get accomplished enough to really understand how glass moves and to be able to heat and keep everything on center, as well as he's been doing for us here today. So George has been working, probably the most senior member of our team, working with glass for almost 30 years. Has a lot of really wonderful experience and heads up a lot of our special projects here at the museum, getting roped into lifting a lot of glass for us. There we go. And it's such a lovely shot of that piece. Now the connection this has to the pipe is pretty strong. We wanted to have a nice, sturdy, stable base to be able to hold on to this piece the entire time. When we get close to getting ready to break this free, we'll start to narrow that down. There's a question earlier about the weaknesses in these pieces, and the contact joints, of course, are a weak area, but the connection between the punty and the piece, that is always a classic connection that we want to break cleanly. So it all gets a little bit exciting right here at the end, but once again, we'd like to thank everyone for tuning in online. We had a lot of really wonderful questions from the global community here today. We're glad to have you join us from all over the world to watch Dan Friday make this beautiful piece. Check out the social media. We've got plenty of images that will be up and running over the next couple days. I'm going to narrow down that piece. We also have a small but mighty crowd here in the museum itself, so I thank you all for joining us here at the Corning Museum of Glass throughout your day. It's been a really special week working with Dan. Once again, he's going to be here until Friday, so if you are in the local area, I highly suggest you stop in, take a closer look at some of this amazing work he's been working on, and watching him live action here with us in the amphitheater shop. All hands on deck here for these critical last moments of the piece, making sure it's got just the right temperature. We don't want it moving around. If we load it into this annealing oven and it's still moving, it could cause a flat spot or cause the whole balance to be a little bit off. This is really where a lot of this years of experience comes in for Dan, recognizing the small little subtle changes and things that he sees in this glass. To know where it's hot, where it's not, and how to balance it out and call exact timing on when to take it off the pipe. Those spot heat torches are really helpful in maintaining those heats, and also making sure using those torches for a lot of the sculpting that he did here today, really allowing you to spot heat specific areas. I really love the playful quality that all of these pieces have. Very nice gestural images with these animals. So you can see every time they come back to the bench, Taylor's getting right underneath it. Even when they're not ready to break it off, he wants to be ready just in case. A little bit of water on that connection. This thermally shocks the glass just a little bit. Light tap's all it took. Now they're going to spot heat that just a little bit, and then we bring it over to our annealing oven for safekeeping. They're short stairs. That's why he gets so dressed up, so he can take his time, be nice and calm. There we go. Dan Friday and the team. Amazing, amazing piece. Very nicely done, very well coordinated. What an amazing pinnacle piece of the residency.